Hello and welcome to Beginning Fly Tying Part 1. Today I hope to cover some basic information to get you started on what is a fun and rewarding hobby, which can also greatly enrich your fishing experience. In Part 1 of this Beginning Fly Tying series, I'll be using a vise, a bobbin, scissors, fly tying thread, and some hooks. Later in this series, I'll be using miscellaneous materials to tie to the hooks and start tying flies. If you already have this equipment, use what you have. If you don't have any equipment, only a possible interest in, or you're considering starting fly tying, don't buy new equipment or any materials yet. Watch these videos first. I will have a short video near the end of this series with things to watch for that should help you select good equipment and materials. I'll have some general recommendations, but I won't be recommending any specific manufacturers. Raj Kletke in this series is really meant for beginning fly tyers, although there may be some information useful for the intermediate fly tyer also. This series is not meant to be entirely comprehensive, but is meant to supplement other resources that are available. You'll note that with some techniques, I tie differently than many fly tyers. However, it's best for you to try multiple techniques and see which works best for you. I won't be tying a specific fly until the very end of this series, but will be showing techniques that will be useful in tying these common trout flies. Initially, I recommend practice tying with well-known fly patterns that can easily be found in books or online. You'll fish better with flies that you have confidence in. So, unless you've caught fish on one of your original creations, you're likely to fish better and, therefore, catch more fish with known fly patterns. I'm assuming that you already have a good quality vise that can hold a hook firmly. If your vise can't hold a hook firmly after proper adjustment, tying flies will be frustrating. I like a rotary vise and have done another series which can be found on this YouTube channel on rotary vise techniques. But a rotary vise or an expensive vise is not really needed to enjoy fly tying or tying beautiful flies. Just be sure your vise holds a hook firmly. Obviously, this vise needs adjustment. As you can see, the hook slips easily with pressure. This would be very frustrating if every time you pull down on the thread, the hook slips like this. However, after proper adjustment, the hook is firm in the vise and won't slip with pressure. If your vise can't hold the hook firmly enough to bend the hook without slipping, try adjusting it or consider getting a different vise. Hooks come in many sizes and shapes. For most of the hooks you'll use for trout fishing, the larger number means a smaller hook. You can see the number 12 hook on the left is larger than the number 16 hook on the right. Get some good quality dry fly hooks and some 2 or 3x long hooks in sizes 12 through 16 to get started. Later you'll be adding other hooks to suit your interests. I tie lots of small flies down to number 26 for the type of fishing I enjoy, and eventually you will too if you're a trout fisherman. The techniques for tying very small flies are very similar to the techniques you'll practice on the number 16 hooks, but you'll enjoy the tiny hooks much more with good lighting and a good magnification system. There are several good systems available, and you can add one later as your interest in tying small flies grows. Let's quickly look at the parts of the hook so you'll know what I mean when I mention a part. The hook eye is at the front of the hook and is where you tie your fly to the tippet. The point of the hook is the sharp end. The shank of the hook is the long straight wire behind the eye. The gape, which is also known as the gap, and you'll see it spelled both ways in various books, is the distance between the shank and the point. The bend of the hook is the curved wire at the back of the hook. The total length of the hook is from the front of the eye to the back of the bend. The barb is the small raised part of wire just back of the hook point. I either buy barbless hooks or pinch these barbs down, but that's personal preference. Before putting the hook in the vise, check the eye of the hook to make sure it is correctly formed and closed. Defective hooks are very rare when you buy good brands, but you don't want to waste your time tying a fly on a defective hook, so check anyway. If I don't have a barbless hook in the size or style I want for a particular fly, I like to debarb the hook before tying the fly also. This is easily done with a debarbing pliers. However, again, this is just personal preference. Once you've checked your hook and debarbed it if desired, put the hook into the vise. Adjust properly for size of the hook so the hook is held firmly. For practice, let's start with a size number 12 hook. The hook shank should be parallel to the base of the table. Note that the point of the hook is exposed and obvious. Don't try to cover the point in the vise. The point is thinner than the rest of the hook, so it may break, but more importantly, you want to be able to see the gape size for judging proper proportions. Proper proportions help define a good fly from a poor fly. Threads come in many colors and sizes. Different manufacturers use different systems to designate the size of the thread. Many use the aught or O system, with the higher first number being thinner thread. For example, 8/0 is thinner than 6/0 and will generally be weaker in the same brand. However, strength varies by brand, so one brand's 8/0 may actually be stronger than another brand's 6/0. Use whatever fly tying thread you have now and add colors and sizes as you see the need or want. I use mainly 6/0 and 8/0 on the size 12 through 18 hooks that I commonly tie, but I carry some 14/0 for tiny flies and 3/0 for streamers. There are many excellent bobbins available. Start with what you have. You'll develop likes and dislikes about bobbins as you tie, and will likely buy multiple bobbins to hold various thread colors and sizes rather than frequently having to change threads out of a single bobbin. I use a commercial bobbin threader, but a thin piece of monofilament doubled will work, or some try to poke the thread through the tube as far as possible and then suck the thread the rest of the way. Whichever way you prefer, thread your bobbin now with the thread you have available. We'll be starting with 6/0 black thread and a size 12 hook in this video for demonstration. Your bobbin is now threaded and ready. But before you start your thread on the hook, I recommend learning to hold your main scissors in your right hand, which is your bobbin hand. I apologize to left-handers, but I'm sure by now you're used to transposing instructions. Very quickly, this will become second nature and will save you lots of time in the future. I use a 3.5-inch long scissors, but a 4-inch scissors works fine also. Don't use your main scissors to cut wire or any material that would quickly dull it, so have a secondary scissors also. Note that the one scissors ring is kept in the ring finger with the body of the scissors in the palm of the hand until needed. You can then easily move your thumb into the other ring and use your index finger to guide the scissors point precisely to where you want to cut. You can just as quickly remove your thumb and get the scissors back into position to hold the bobbin. Now, let's start putting your thread on the hook. I wrap the free end of the thread around my left index finger to give me a good grip on the thread. With the thread vertical on my side of the hook, I start a short distance behind the eye of the hook. Keep the free end of the thread tight in my left hand and wind the thread forward on the hook, going away from me over the top and toward me under the hook. I wind forward, leaving one eye's length of bare hook. I then wind back over the thread, which locks my thread in place. Don't cut off the free end of the thread yet. Note again, I leave bare hook near the eye, which is approximately one hook eye length. This serves two purposes. First, if you think of and use the front end of your thread wrap as the farthest forward area to tie materials, it will help you stop crowding the eye of the hook, which is a very common problem for beginners and intermediates alike. Second, it leaves room for a distribution wrap if needed. We'll talk about a distribution wrap later in this series. If you ultimately need the extra space for materials, you can always fill it in with thread later. You'll want to be able to put materials on your hook very tightly. So if this is your first time using a particular thread, before you continue, you should find out how much tension you can put on the thread before it breaks. So a couple of times start thread and pull down until the hook bends a lot or the thread breaks. Ultimately, you'll develop a good feel for how much tension you can use. Once you're comfortable knowing how much tension you can put on the thread, start some more thread and then cover the rest of the hook with a thread base. This is most easily done by keeping tension on the free end of the thread at about a 45-degree angle to the hook shank and winding the thread over the hook shank and the free end. The thread will slide into place as a single layer. Be sure to use an angled winding motion to keep the thread from hitting the point of the hook. Once you're at the end of the hook shank, usually at the same level as the hook barb, you can cut the free end off, but with weaker threads, it's quicker to break it off. Put tension on the bobbin thread and snap the free end of the thread forward, parallel to the hook shank. Don't snap the thread perpendicular to the hook shank or you'll break some hooks. If the thread base was pulled forward, you can always put a few more wraps of thread on. Before we start tying in materials, let's look at some beginning principles. Use these principles as you tie. 1. Always tie materials on a thread base, unless you want the material to distribute around the hook, which is also known as slipping around the hook. On smaller hooks, I put this thread base down before tying, as we just did. But on larger hooks, you may want to put the thread base down just before you tie in materials to that area. 2. Tie materials in with as tight a thread as possible without breaking the thread. 3. Tie materials in with multiple wraps where the added thickness won't interfere with the looks of the fly, but use a single wrap of thread for placement. Frequently, the tie-in and placement will be at the same location, but not always. We'll show more of what this means as we go along. And 4, place materials precisely, which will help make a neater fly. For precise placement of materials, you need good thread control. By the time you've wrapped the thread base, you've put quite a twist in the thread, as it gains one twist with each wrap. If you take tension off the thread, you'll see that the thread kicks to the right. If looking from above, you spin the bobbin counterclockwise, my apologies to those of you with digital watches, you undo the twist and can even twist the thread in the opposite direction, which will kick the thread to the left. This left kick can be very useful at times, as you can easily control how far the thread kicks to the left by stopping it with your fingernail. This can help with very precise placement of a tie-in point. So now we've looked at some of the essentials of beginning fly tying. We're holding the scissors in our right hand. We've chosen thread, put it in our bobbin, and tested it to know how much tension we can put on without breaking it. We have a thread base on the hook, and we're ready to tie on some materials. We've even looked at thread control and some principles of tying on these materials. So join me in beginning fly tying part 2. We'll tie on some materials. See you soon.